decision maker line, Father Frank Pavone. Father Pavone is an American Roman Catholic priest. He's a pro-life activist. He is the national director of Priests for Life. He's the chairman and pastoral director of Rachel's Vineyard, one of the real leaders in the effort to protect the sanctity of human life. And Father Pavone, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you today.
Well, it's great to have you on the program, Father Pavone, and you've been very involved in the pro-life movement now for a long time, for decades. And the reason I wanted to bring you on is to talk about the progress that we're making on the sanctity of life front. I tell my listening audience at the end of every single program, well, almost every day I leave myself enough time to say it, that we are fighting a winnable war, that we're involved in a war that we can win. And what we're seeing, I think, Father Pavone, on the pro-life front is some evidence that here's a key front line in the battle for the soul of our culture, and we're making significant progress for the hearts and souls of the American people as well as on the legislative front. Talk to us about that.
Well, we certainly are, and in fact, it's often the pro-abortion side that is more aware of how much progress we're making than sometimes those of us who are right here in the trenches. But it is true. We're making tremendous progress, and one of those arenas is on the legislative front. Even though on the federal level abortion has been preserved as a so-called right under the Supreme Court Roe v. Wade and subsequent decisions, nevertheless, the courts have been increasingly willing to give to the individual states the opportunity under the law to limit and regulate abortion, because the abortion industry is totally out of control. They see no limits for themselves. They have no scruples. They want to obey no kinds of laws or limitations or regulations that apply to any other medical practice. And so the states are, in fact, rising to the opportunity to do the kinds of things that the court is allowing them to do. So this is one of many signs of progress and reasons for hope in this ongoing battle to protect the unborn.
Father Pavone, talking about how radical the abortion industry is, we played the soundbite a week or so ago of the Planned Parenthood lobbyist in Florida testifying before the Florida legislature, and it's on a bill that would mandate medical care be given to a baby that survives an abortion attempt. The baby's born. It's on the table. It's an American citizen laying there. It's completely separated from the body of its mother. And she was asked, and she said, well, I think whether that baby lives or dies ought to be up to the mother or the family or the physician. So she's talking there about infanticide. I mean, that's about as radical as you can get.
That's exactly right. And this, of course, is no surprise to us who have been following the thinking of the abortion industry for a long time. This is how radical their philosophy really is. Because once you say it's okay to tear a baby apart inside the womb, you have so seared your conscience that you're not going to see the dignity that life has once it comes out of the womb. Peter Singer said at one time, the so-called ethicist that endorses infanticide, he says, look, the pro-life people are correct when they say that birth cannot be such a morally significant dividing line. And so the only two consistent positions, again, still quoting him, are A, oppose abortion, or B, endorse infanticide. Those are the only two consistent positions one can have. But you can't say, I'm for abortion, but the baby that's newborn should be protected. It doesn't make a logical sense.
Well, and Singer was more radical even than people realize. If I understand his view correctly, Father Pavone, he was in favor of parents having up to 30 days after the child was born or is born to decide whether it lives or dies.
Yes, that's exactly right. And, when you think about it, if choice is more important than life, then two questions arise. A, who draws the line? And B, why should any line be drawn at all? And so they're just living out the logical implications of their position. We, on the other hand, say there is no line to be drawn. As soon as someone is verifiably human, which, of course, we are, each of us from the single-cell stage, then they deserve protection. They demand protection by virtue of their inherent dignity. So, this is encouraging, really, because as time goes on, as I've often said, as they said in the civil rights movement, no lie can live forever. Eventually, the truth is going to come out. And what's so encouraging here, and this is just one example that we're touching on, is that the truth of how radically inconsistent the abortion mentality is with the values of the American people, the more this truth comes out, the more people are going to be empowered to say, okay, enough is enough. We cannot allow this industry to continue any longer.
Well, and we've seen, as you mentioned, Father Pavone, talking here with Father Pavone, a priest for life, we've seen on the state level a number of very significant advances legislatively, including just recently in North Dakota. Tell us why we ought to be encouraged by what's happened in the state of North Dakota.
Well, as I mentioned, the courts have allowed the states to take more and more action against abortion, but this time North Dakota has taken a step that many believe shouldn't even be taken. I believe it should be, and I'm glad it was. But the reason some say, oh, this shouldn't even be tried, is that it so challenges the dominant thinking of the courts. What North Dakota's governor did just recently, after the legislature brought him the bill, is he signed into law a measure that says if a baby's heartbeat can be detected, that baby is to be protected in North Dakota. Now, a baby's heartbeat can be detected as early as 6 weeks. So this law bans abortion in North Dakota from 6 weeks of the pregnancy forward. That is by far the boldest step that any state has taken since Roe versus Wade. It's not a regulation, it's not a limitation, it's an actual prohibition on the abortion procedure. This is very significant.
And we saw something similar in the state of Arkansas, Father Pavone, where they passed a fetal heartbeat bill. I think there it was set at 12 weeks, so the North Dakota law is even more protective of unborn human life than the Arkansas. But the thing that was significant to me in Arkansas, and I'd like you to comment on this, you had a Democrat governor that vetoed that fetal heartbeat bill, and the Arkansas legislature, House and Senate, they immediately took that back and overrode the governor's veto. In fact, they did it on another pro-life bill as well.
That was very encouraging. We see the voice of the people speaking through these legislators when they override a position really that on the part of that governor represents a strangely consistent pattern among those in the Democratic Party. Now, there's no reason why it needs to be that way, but we in fact see that it is. And yet, thank God for the override process that exists in legislation in the United States. And this is what's happening. The people's sentiments are crystallizing when it comes to abortion. The more the American people see how absolutely out of control and extreme our abortion policies are.
Now, Kansas has a bill somewhere. I don't remember exactly where it's at in the legislative pipeline, but it would define human life as beginning at the moment of conception. It would accomplish what a number of these personhood initiatives have done. Do you have any comment on what's going on in the state of Kansas?
Yes, it is consistent, of course, with everything we know now from science, and it is consistent with a number of efforts in other states. In fact, North Dakota, which we were speaking of a moment ago, also has a measure here that's going to go before the people, likely next year in the 2014 election cycle, which would do a similar thing. It would say, look, all the unborn are persons. And of course, that's the truth, biologically, philosophically, morally, that's the truth. And this is beginning now to pop up in various states. Whether it's going to succeed depends in large part on how well the message is presented, because the other side is always going to focus on hard cases. What our side has to focus on is, look, A, what is the truth, biologically speaking? It's no longer a mystery when a human life begins. And B, look how extreme our policies are. Why shouldn't we be protecting the weak and the young? So I'm excited about those particular initiatives.
Well, you look about the life beginning at conception, those bills. We've got another effort here in our home state. Groups come together to get a personhood amendment on the ballot that would define life as beginning at conception in the state of Mississippi. And this kind of follows the direction that was actually given by the Supreme Court in the Roe v. Wade case, because in Roe, the judges said, look, if we knew when life began, if that issue was resolved and it was in statute when life begins, then this whole Roe v. Wade case would be moot. If there was a legal definition of when life begins, and we would have really nothing to talk about here, because once human life begins, then it has protections under the 14th Amendment. So these personhood amendments, these life at conception bills, are very, very significant constitutionally.
Well, and let's look at it this way. Let's ask a question. Is there such a thing as a human being who is not a human person? And I think when people talk with each other about this issue, let's see how people respond to that question, because If the answer to that is no, then that means every human being, whether they are healthy or sick, black or white, young or old, big or small, ugly or pretty, smart or dumb, every human being is to be protected. If, on the other hand, the answer is yes, there is such a thing as a human being who's not a human person, well then, this is how genocides, holocausts, oppression, slavery, discrimination, racism, this is how all of these things and abortion itself come into play. Because then it is the people who happen to have power who decide which of the human beings who exist are in fact or are not in fact persons. It's such a dangerous line to cross. Abortion itself crosses that line because Roe v. Wade said, well, we don't know if this is a human life, but we're going to say it's not a human person. Well, now, when you take protection away from one group by saying that, you have taken away protection really from everybody else. And that's, I think, what more and more people are starting to realize.
My good friend Neil Mammon is the author of a great book on Christians being involved in politics. Jesus was involved in politics. Why aren't you? Why isn't your church? He's made the observation that on this issue, when human life begins, when that becomes a human being, and, you ask somebody, well, it's not a human being. It's just a clump of cells at this stage. Well, when does it become a human being? Everybody has a different answer to that question that are on the pro-abortion camp. Neil made the observation, look, if you're out hunting and you see something moving in the brush and you don't know whether that is your buddy who's out there hunting with you or it's a moose or a deer, whatever, you wait until you know. In other words, you're going to err. Exactly. If you don't know. You always want to err on the side of life.
Exactly. And that's why, the legislatures and the courts have realized this. The legislatures can act to protect human beings even when there is doubt. It's not up to the legislature to resolve every doubt in the medical arena or in other arenas, too. It's up to them to protect the people. And so you always give favor to the doubt. You say, well, let's give the benefit of the doubt because we don't want public servants who don't know the difference between serving the public and killing the public.
Our guest on our Decision Maker line has been Father Frank Pavone. He's a Roman Catholic priest, pro-life activist. He is the National Director of Priests for Life. He's the chairman and pastoral director of Rachel's Vineyard, one of the men that's been out there leading the battle to protect unborn human life. Father Pavone, thank you so much for taking time to be with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life.